Anyway, so yeah, tonight we're going to talk about the death penalty. And of course, this is a really emotive subject, isn't it? It always has been. You know, is the death penalty warranted? You know, in certain cases, serial killers, premeditated murder, murder that involves children, murder of children. There's so much, there's always so much debate over this. Now in Britain, that's all right, Trace, you lucky you missed the song. In Britain, the death penalty, when did we last, it was in the 60s. The last time anyone was, let's see, abolition of the death penalty. So, the executions that we did in Great Britain were hangings, weren't they? I mean, I just do, as much as there's sort of a part of me that I can see how people get so angry at some killers that are just so evil and that, I still, personally, I cannot go with the death penalty. But anyway, the last one took place in 1964. Capital punishment for murder was suspended in 1965 and was finally abolished in 1969, and then a little bit later in 1973 in Northern Ireland. So it still, though, was remained in place for offences such as treason, and it actually wasn't completely abolished until 1998. But having said that, the last execution for treason took place in 1946. So in 2004, the protocol number 13 to the European Convention on Human Rights became binding on the United Kingdom, which prohibits, this is Wikipedia I'm reading from, it prohibits the restoration of the death penalty as long as the UK is a party to the convention. So as long as we're in the European Convention on Human Rights, we can't bring back in Britain, you can't bring back the death penalty anyway, unless we leave, because even though we've left Europe or the European Union, we're still part of the European Convention on Human Rights. So Britain cannot bring it back at the moment. Anyway, apparently, so going back in history, for example, during the reign of Henry VIII, as many as 72,000 people were executed. And of course, it included a lot more things. It would include murder, treason, manslaughter, infanticide, rape, arson, grand larceny, highway robbery, buggery, sodomy, and heresy. God, I hope YouTube's not listening. So, it used to be very, very common. And it wasn't until 1908 that the execution of juveniles under the age of 16 was banned. And then, we carried on using the death penalty, hanging, etc. But the last juvenile was sentenced to death in the United Kingdom in 1932, someone called Harold Wilkins, for a sexually related murder, but he was reprieved due to his age. Anyway, as probably a lot of you know, there are killers like the Moors murderers, who literally just escaped the death penalty, because the death penalty, just as around the time that they were arrested, they were Sorry, I got distracted then. I was reading the chat. Yeah, round about the death penalty was abolished, of course, just around about the time they were arrested. So they narrowly missed the death penalty. The last woman to be hanged was Ruth Ellis. Of course, that was a very controversial execution because it was a crime of passion. See, the problem with the death penalty for me is, where do you draw the line as to what murders? There's lots of different kinds of murders at the end of the day, aren't they? And where do you draw the line as to this one should be death penalty, this one shouldn't? That's the problem for me. And also, it just seems like two wrongs don't make a right. I can understand the emotional, especially if it was one of your family members or one of your loved ones. But the thought of the state actually killing someone just doesn't sit well with me. And of course, the other thing is, how do you do it? This is what causes the most controversy in the United States at the moment. Because, in the United States, some states have it and some states don't. And then, of course, you've also got the fact that most people sit on death row for years and years and years before, if ever, they are finally executed. Sometimes they get, their sentence gets commuted. From sure, the sentence gets commuted from the death penalty to life in prison. That happens sometimes as well. So I know Jim's always talking. I shouldn't have put. If I would have known Jim was coming on this stream, I wouldn't have put this dress on. I would have put a different dress on. So yeah, so it's a big talking point at the moment in America, because on the 8th, well, there's been a couple of issues. The first issue was in January, because let me share this with you. This gentleman was executed in Alabama using nitrogen gas, and apparently it wasn't quick. It wasn't he'd already survived one execution attempt, this guy. They had one attempt at executing him and it didn't work, and then when they tried it again, apparently it was really grisly. So Kenneth Eugene Smith, he was scheduled, he has been executed now, to be the first. Tia, you've got to stop that. Stop it. He was actually executed finally. So a death row inmate has been executed using a novel method. Why have authorities in Alabama used nitrogen gas? And why is it controversial? Because this really is the other issue for me. How do you do it? So, of course, for a long time, well, they used hanging, of course. And then they started using the electric chair. Then it became lethal injection. And now some states even have a firing squad. They seem to be very reluctant to actually use that. But now this nitrogen gas seems to have appeared, and they used it to kill this man. So Kenneth Eugene Smith was originally scheduled to be put to death with lethal drugs in November 2022. Prison staff inserted one intravenous line, but 2 lines were required to administer the lethal injection. After they struggled for an hour to insert the second IV, the execution was called off. I mean, I've got to say that he should have been reprieved then, I think. He should have been reprieved to life in prison. I think he should have been let go. But he'd gone through all that. To me, that is inhumane, to make him go through it all again. he'd been through all that and they cocked it up. So his sentence, in my view, maybe you don't agree with me, should have been commuted to life in prison then, and just leave him in prison, because he shouldn't have had to go through all that again, I don't think. So Smith, who was convicted for the murder for hire of a preacher's wife in 1988, was eventually executed using nitrogen gas instead. So this was in January this year. So this was one big controversy this year in America over the death penalty. Now, also, I mean, I'm not saying the murder for hire is, not a horrible thing to do. Of course it is. But wonder what happened to the preacher. Did the preacher get the death penalty as well? Sometimes you do. Sometimes I think, why do some people get the death penalty and other people don't? It doesn't seem fair sometimes to me. Anyway, it's a controversial method that had never been used before by a US state, and it represents the latest step in the search for a new way to execute convicted criminals, even as the death penalty has become less popular over time. So around half of US states still have death penalty laws. Execution methods vary, but some states still allow execution by hanging, firing squad, or the electric chair. Now, just as I'm even saying those words, it just feels brutal to me. Hi, Katrine. It's just the Chihuahua, Tracy, that's all. When the Chihuahua barks, my dog barks. The Chihuahua up the road. According to the Death Penalty Information Centre, a not-for-profit organisation that is critical of how executions are administered, no method has been found to violate the US Constitution's ban on cruel and unusual punishments, although some state courts have outlawed some methods. In recent decades, though, most states have converged on lethal injection, the administration of intravenous drugs that sedate and kill the convict, as the main execution method. Texas was the first state to execute a convicted criminal with lethal injection in 1982, and last year 24 people were executed in the US, most of them in Florida and Texas. I mean, they love it, don't they? In Florida and Texas, it's like giving the death penalty, It's like they like to throw the death penalty at people. So that Davido Kanobovic, that case we've been following, poor Anna Knezovic, her body still hasn't been found. He wants to watch out. His trial must be coming up soon, because he could get the death penalty. You sort of hope he does, because it's just awful what he did to Anna. The emotional part of me sort of agrees with it. And then there's the other emotional part of me that just thinks, no, it's not right to take a life. To me, only God has God. We don't have the right to take someone else's life. And if we do, that makes us just as bad as them. But, it's a real conundrum, isn't it? I mean, the thing is, if it was easy, people would have done something about it already, wouldn't they? But it's not an easy question. So all the ones in Florida and Texas so far have been by lethal injection. We're going to look at the other sort of controversy at the moment is on the 8th of August, a man was put to death by, I think that was lethal injection. I'm not sure, but anyway, he was executed, or it may have been the nitrous thing. And it was a bit, anytime there's an execution, there's always a big sort of furore around it, isn't it? You always get the people that are, waving him off like and saying burn in hell, protesting outside, and then you get the other people that are saying, the death penalty is wrong. So here's the electric chair. 8 states still allow the use of the electric chair in executions. Of course, that's, if you've watched the Green Mile, that I think I do think it's barbaric, the electric chair, to be honest. So the process is not always straightforward. This is intravenous injection. Several months prior to Smith's previous botched execution, Alabama authorities failed to put to death another death row inmate, Alan Miller, because of difficulties in inserting an IV needle. Several other lethal injection executions have also not gone according to plan. And states have recently had difficulty in obtaining lethal injection drugs. In some cases, drug manufacturers won't sell them or they no longer produce them. God. Anyway, the UK and the European Union banned exports of the chemicals in 2011, and 5 years later, American drugs giant Pfizer, so they're making COVID injections now instead. The last open market, that's probably what they're using all what they've got left over for. The last open market source of lethal injection drugs announced it would no longer sell them to be used in executions. So states are scrambling for other ways to execute prisoners. Texas, for instance, has sourced its deadly chemicals from a secret list of private compounding pharmacies which mix their own drugs. I mean, for God's sake. What is nitrogen hypoxia? So, prison officials strapped a mask to Smith's face and administered the pure nitrogen gas. The gas itself is not poisonous, as nitrogen makes up more than 3/4 of the Earth's atmosphere. But in pure concentrated form, breathing in the gas chokes off oxygen to the brain, a process called nitrogen hypoxia. And the use of nitrogen gas in executions has been approved by 3 states, including Alabama, in 2018 and has withstood various legal challenges since. Why is it controversial? Let's have a look at this video, don't we?
Nitrogen hypoxia actually is a name created to designate this particular method of execution. The whole goal is to get an inmate to breathe only nitrogen, which in theory is supposed to be painless. But nitrogen hypoxia is definitely unusual. It's never been used in the history of the world. We have a history in the United States of using execution methods that have never been tried before. No one had been electrocuted before electrocution. No one had been exposed to lethal gas, and nobody had experienced lethal injection. We started with hanging, but in 1898, the governor of New York thought that the state should have a new method of execution. They picked electrocution. By the 1920s, and they came up with lethal gas, which took off in a chamber slowly, and it would take up to 15 or 18 minutes for somebody to die. Because of all the problems with lethal gas and electrocution, the state of Oklahoma came up with yet a new method called lethal injection. It was not used until 1982, but that first execution was botched. It just didn't work. Nonetheless, it's the most common method. Alabama has a terrible history of botched lethal injections. The main problem that Alabama, as well as many other lethal injection states, have is actually inserting an IV line into an inmate. In 2018, following in the footsteps of Oklahoma and Mississippi, Alabama adopted nitrogen hypoxia and put it on their state statute as an alternative for inmates even before they had any kind of protocol. And that's where we get to where we are today.
Well, I just see, this is it. Once you decide there's going to be a death penalty, how are you going to do it? Now I'm sort of watching that and I'm thinking, you know, of sadly pets that dogs that I've had to take to. I've had 2 dogs that I've had to have put to sleep when they've got to, you know, one was 20 and the other was 17, and you know, that horrible decision. I think any of us that have had pets, you've had to make that decision. It's horrible. don't they just give an injection that stops the heart? I don't know why. Just seems, it was so very quick, and it was so very, there was no, can't we do that to people? I don't know, but not that I want to do it, because I don't believe in the death penalty. But if we're going to have the death penalty, surely there's a more humane way. Anyway, so this procedure had critics even before his execution. It's an experimental procedure. Many things can go wrong. I mean, imagine being the one that people might say, oh, well, if you're a killer, it don't matter if you're experimented on. But, I don't agree with that, because it does matter. Because otherwise, what's the difference, between Tia? What's the difference between us and them? If we experiment on them. So Deborah Deno, a criminologist, said it's supposed to be painless, but I have to empathise. That's in theory, she says. These masks don't usually fit people. They're not airtight. Air can get in. Smith could have started vomiting or survived the attempted execution with brain damage. And proponents of this method, though, they reject criticism and point to examples of nitrogen hypoxia occurring in industrial accidents, with victims apparently becoming unaware of what's happening to them. So, but some witnesses to Smith's execution said he did not lose consciousness within seconds. He inhaled the gas for many minutes, thrashing all the while before finally succumbing. Because, of course, people go and watch these executions. Sometimes it's like the victim's family, isn't it? Sometimes it's like journalists and stuff. It just all seems inhuman to me. I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. But the answer to me would be just do away with the death penalty, to be honest. In fact, the more I'm reading this, I'm coming right over. I can get the thing with this is like, I think when my son was young, if anyone would have done anything to my son, or even now, that's how you would feel. You'd want them to face, you'd hate them, wouldn't you? But I don't know if I would, if I would want them to. I don't know. Well, I hope I never have to make that decision or think about it. Anyway, this was in January this year. The flurry of attention over Smith's execution comes as enthusiasm for the death penalty has ebbed across much of the US, and the number of executions is down substantially from a peak of 98 in 1999. So that was the first controversy this year about the death penalty. Now there's been another controversy on the 8th of August. This guy, Tabaron Honey, his name is. Let me get his picture up. David. Yeah, maybe they should use drowning. Yeah, die in 30 seconds. Yeah. Now, this is the case that's caused all the controversy recently in America. So Tabaron Honey was executed on the 8th of August. So literally a couple of weeks ago. I've wanted to do something like a video about this ever since, because it was all over all the news channels, etc. And but of course there's been a lot of other things going on, and I've not had a chance to do it so far. So this is the guy. He's a Native American, and he murdered his ex-girlfriend's mother in 1998. But he didn't only do that. So I'm going to read out to you what he did. And it is pretty, so I'm just going to give you a trigger warning, because It is pretty horrible what he did. So this is in Utah. Now, of course, Utah is the big Mormon state. This is where Chad Daybell has been given the death penalty. You know, in the Doomsday Mum case, Lori Vallow, she escaped the death penalty. I'm trying to think how she escaped it now. But anyway, she didn't get the death penalty for the murder of her 2 children and his Chad Daybell's wife, Tammy. But Laurie got away with the death penalty, and I can't remember off the top of my head how she did. But Chad Daybell has been given the death penalty. So it'd be interesting to see how long it takes to get around to it. I mean, he could be in prison 20 years. So go through all the appeal procedure and this, that, and the other. It takes ages. That's the other thing I don't like about the death penalty. Is it takes so long. And yet with Eileen Wuornos, the female serial killer, gosh, that happened so quickly, you know, so soon after her trial. Maybe she didn't appeal. I don't know why that went through so quickly, but normally they take ages. Anyway, so this guy, how old was he when he died? I think he was 48 when he was executed. And he's a Native American from the Hopi tribe. Now, he was an alcoholic. He said that he first was given alcohol when he was 5 years old. And in a later appeal, so he went through all the appeal processes. His attorney stated he grew up in poverty and he suffered multiple head injuries as a child. So they tried to use that as anyway, all his appeals were dismissed. So his murder victim was 49 at the time. And she was also a Native American, a member of the Paiute Indian tribe of Utah. Her family members described her as a pillar of her community. She was a substance use counselor and a caregiver to her family. Now let me see if I can find a picture of. There probably won't be a picture of her. All the attention is always on the bloody perpetrator. But I wonder if there must be a photo of her somewhere. Let's have a look. Yeah, there is. So this is the lady that he killed. Claudia Marie Benn. And it was the mother of his partner. Now, also, not only did he kill her, he did more than that. Again, trigger warning. Be careful, you know, it's not very nice, let's say, so just be aware. So he had dated one of her daughters, Carol Pikiavit, and he dated her for a few years off and on, and they had a daughter together. And after they broke up, she moved in with her mother. So he obviously had some sort of resentment towards her mother. But anyway, apparently on July the 9th, 1998, Honey called her, demanding that she visit him immediately. And he threatened to kill several of her family members if she did not comply. But she left her house to go to work, and so she was not home at the time of the murder. A few hours later, he broke into that home. So he broke into the home of this woman, Claudia Marie Benn, the mother of his ex-girlfriend, his child's grandmother. And he shattered a sliding glass door, broke into the home. She tried to defend herself with a kitchen knife, but he overpowered her, attacked her with a knife. Now, this is where really you need the trigger warning, because he CUT her throat 4 times from ear to ear. He also mutilated her corpse. I won't go into the details of what he did. Also, her 3 young granddaughters were in the house covered in blood, and he had attacked one of those granddaughters in an sex way, and he had caused intimate injuries to that girl. So, you know, he wasn't a nice man. What he did was, you know, terrible. So he waived his right to a jury sentencing during his trial, and he opted for a bench trial, which is when just the judge decides. And on May the 20th, 1999, he was sentenced to death by lethal injection after the court convicted him of aggravated red rum, burglary, rape, and forcible SODOMY. God, you just think none of these words, YouTube's not going to be happy with any of those words. So after that, he went through all the rounds of appeals, etc. But finally, they were all denied. His lawyers tried to challenge, because in Utah, they can give you lethal injection or death by firing squad. Now, I think I'd personally prefer death by firing squad, because I think surely they can't all miss. You know, I mean, surely that's going to be pretty quick and instant if you've got to go through it. Anyway, his lawyers challenged all of it, but the judge denied it, and his execution warrant was signed, and his execution by lethal injection was scheduled to take place on August the 8th, and we're going to look at the night of that execution. There's we're going to look at a video that a news company had put together of the night of the injection. So this was a new lethal injection cocktail consisting of fentanyl, ketamine, and potassium. Now, ketamine, wasn't that what Matthew Perry is supposed to have died of, isn't it? And fentanyl, of course, is this drug that kills a lot of people in America. It's that take it deliberately, and potassium chloride. So again, more appeals made, etc. But to cut a very long story short, because he filed a petition for clemency, he talked about his childhood poverty, neglect, but none of it worked. None of it worked. So he did, 2 days before he was executed, he had a hearing before the parole board to request a reprieve. And he expressed remorse for the murder, and he said, "Yes, I'm a monster. The only thing that kept me going all these years, the only thing I knew 100%, this would never have happened if I was in my right mind. But I make no excuses." Anyway, it was rejected. So about a dozen of his family members, including his granddaughter, his mother-in-law's granddaughter, who was also his daughter, planned to attend his execution. And his own mother, also attended the execution. And his daughter said that her side of the family largely supported the execution, but she did not. His last meal was a cheeseburger, French fries, and a milkshake. And his execution took place at midnight on August the 8th. And in his last statement, he said, "From the start, it's been, if it needs to be done for the victims' families to heal, let's do this. If they tell you can't change, don't listen to them. To all my brothers and sisters here, continue to change. I love you all. Take care." Anyway, after he was executed, his family were allowed to go in and perform like a spiritual ceremony over the body, and he was pronounced officially dead at 12:25 a.m. Oh, you know what? Stop. Nobody's even barking outside. Shh. Shh. Gosh, she's always got to. She's always right. Bad girl. She's always got to get the last word, that dog. Yeah. I mean, he wasn't a nice man, and it was horrible what he did. He could, couldn't have done any more. He did it all in one. Like, he murdered the mother and assaulted the granddaughter, and did terrible. It was terrible what he did. It was terrible what he did. You can't take away from that. Somebody says on this video, I think they were watching, that if ever there was anyone, like just as you've said, David, if there was ever anyone that was a candidate for the death penalty, it was him. But, anyway. Now, of course, another reason, we're going to have a look at that video in a minute of the night when he was, I keep wanting to say assassinated, but of course I mean executed. Because another reason why the death penalty was removed, if you like, is because sometimes people were killed who weren't guilty. And of course, once you've executed somebody, it's bad enough when someone goes to prison for 20 years for something that they didn't do and then they get released. But if, once someone's been executed, they can't be released, can they? And of course, this happened in Britain. A famous case in Britain, of course, was Timothy Evans, wasn't it? Let's have a look at that. So any of you who might know or have seen the film 10 Rillington Place, Dr. Christie, who performed illegal abortions, let's have a look. Dr. Christie was this man's landlord, and he performed, like backstreet abortions. And Timothy Evans and his wife went to live at their house, as lodgers, unfortunately for them. And his wife was pregnant, and Dr. Christie not only performed an illegal abortion on her, but RAPD'd her and murdered her. And he actually murdered several women, including his own wife. But at the time, Timothy Evans, he had a sub IQ. He didn't have a very high IQ, and whereas Dr. Christie was this respectable doctor, nobody believed Timothy Evans. Everyone believed the doctor. So Timothy Evans was executed, was sentenced to death. He was taken away and, executed. So when it came out about Dr. Christie and the other women that had murdered, well, he couldn't bring Timothy Evans back from the dead. So, that's another reason why people are not very sort of happy. I'll do a video about that one day, because it's a very interesting case, that. I think that's just a case of how someone, clever like Dr. Christie, could easily sort of pull the wool over the police's eyes. Now, of course, we're in a different era now. That wouldn't happen now because of DNA. So, of course, nowadays you can be 100% certain. So, to me, I would say that if ever the death penalty should be used, it should be beyond any doubt whatsoever. At least now with DNA testing and that, they can prove things more. So maybe, unfair convictions couldn't happen now. What do you think about that? Do you think it's impossible now for someone to be, do you think it's possible? Do you think it's possible now to be unfairly convicted, or do you think that just couldn't happen now? Maybe not. We've got someone at the moment, what's his name? Scott Peterson. Is it Peterson? Yeah, he killed his wife, Lacey Peterson. I did do a video on that. There's a video on that somewhere on my channel. And he's always claimed his innocence. He's not on death row, I don't think. Anyway, well, God, it was ages ago, but he's still trying to claim that he's innocent, but it's pretty unlikely that he is. And because what some people are doing now, of course, is the DNA can be used now. He's saying, that there'll be DNA on the duct tape that doesn't belong to him, so that proves there is a reasonable doubt. Blah, de, blah, de, blah. Oh, come on, Tia, stop barking. No, I'm going to put you out the back. I mean it. I'll put you out the back. Bad girl. Yeah, so I suppose DNA can be used to prove people's innocence as well as people's guilt. And he's sort of, making some. He is definitely the murderer of his wife, Lacey Peterson, and it's not going to come to anything. But he just will not admit that he did it because she was pregnant as well at the time. One thing I've come to realize since I've been doing these true crime videos is so many women, when they're pregnant, it's a very dangerous time. It's such a dangerous time. Just seems to be, that's when, like with Chris Watts and that, it's when the men, if they are thinking of leaving them, or they've got mistress or whatever, which is both those cases was similar. That seems to be like the turning point, when they get pregnant, because then they're going to have to tell their mistresses that they were still sleeping with their wives when they've probably told their mistresses, oh no, we've got it's a dead marriage. They'll have told their mistresses a right load of cock and bull, and then it turns out their wife's pregnant. And when it's all coming out, that quite often, unfortunately, is the time that they decide to take matters into their own hands in more ways than one. Anyway, so yeah, I know there's not many people that have had the death penalty, but still, one is too many, in my opinion. Okay, she's coming for a good one now. You're going to be a good girl now. Please don't bark. Please don't bark. Okay, so now we're going to have a look at this video. Where are we? Okay, yeah. So let's have a look at this video.
This is a special edition from 2 News.
This gentleman breaks into this lady's home. He knows her. He beats her, brutally beats her, bites her. Then he slits her throat 4 times with a 13-inch knife. Then he uses that knife to sexually mutilate her. And this is a sentence defendant has earned. If there was ever a capital case in this state, this is it.
Welcome to our KUTV special report. It is 11:40 p.m. on a Wednesday night. We are here for the execution of Deterrent. We are at the Utah State Correctional Facility, have been here for hours today, and now just minutes away from when that execution is scheduled. I'm Heidi Hatch with Brian Schnee.
Great to be with you tonight because this is kind of a culmination of a process. And I say that because we've been out here a number of hours learning about the steps as we make our way through the remainder of the evening into the early morning hours. The execution of Deterrent is scheduled for 12:01 tomorrow, so roughly 20-ish minutes from right now. The last execution in Utah was actually carried out back in June of 2010 when Ronnie Lee Gardner was shot by a firing squad.
Correctional facility have been here for
So those were pictures of him over the years. So did you see the
for hours today, and now just minutes away from when that execution is scheduled. I'm Heidi Hatch with Brian Schnee.
Great to be with you tonight because this is kind of a culmination of a process. And I say that because we've been out here a number of hours learning about the steps as we make our way through the remainder of the evening into the early morning hours. The execution of Deterrent is scheduled for 12:01 tomorrow, so roughly 20-ish minutes.
So that must be him when he did it. I mean, why did he do it? I mean, maybe he was probably drunk, drugged up. I tell you, alcohol and drugs, they're responsible for most of these cases. Sometimes you think, God, maybe we should just ban it all. But I still think the government likes people to be drugged up and drunk so that they're passive.
minutes from right now. The last execution in Utah was actually carried out back in June of 2010 when Ronnie Lee Gardner was shot by a firing squad.
And for the next hour or so, we will have live team coverage leading up to that execution and waiting from the word from the execution chamber that his death is over. Right now, we have Mark Cabell live at 7800 West and 700 North, about a mile and a half from where we are here at the state prison, where protesters have gathered tonight. Amanda Gilbert, who has witnessed an execution herself, is inside the headquarters here. And we'll have more on what we've been hearing throughout the day in those final hours that have been happening. Also, back in the studio, Lincoln Graves and Jamie McGriff with defense attorney Sky Lazaro and former Utah Attorney General Mark Shurtleff.
Let's begin our coverage with Jim Spiewak tonight. Jim is a witness to Honey's execution. Right now, he's heading to the staging area to be a witness for what's set to take place in about 20 minutes.
Well, the time is almost here for the state.
Yeah, I'm not sure how they allow journalists in there. You know, it's like, it is a bit sort of wrong, isn't it? Doing it like a TV show or something. I don't know whether I really agree with that. I mean, I remember when I've seen videos of outside Ted Bundy's execution. You know, there were a lot of people cheering that execution on, weren't they? But, you know, Ted Bundy had killed, you know, nobody knows exactly how many women he killed and children. He did kill at least one child. And in the 70s, the number of victims of Ted Bundy, and, you know, people tend to turn up, as I say, some people turn up like, you know, wave it, bring it on, like can't wait for them to be executed. And then you get other people turning up who are saying that the death penalty is wrong. So
State's first execution in 14 years. In just a few minutes, Department of Correction staff will take me back past the next line of security to the execution room, where I will be a witness to this execution. And we found out a little bit more information of what is expected to happen. So after an IV line is established, the curtain will be drawn open, where the witnesses will then be able to see how the rest of this plays out. The command to execute will then be given, the drugs will be administered, and medical staff will keep an eye on the EKG until there is no more heartbeat and he will be pronounced dead. That is when the curtain will then be drawn, and Department of Corrections has granted a final request for a small spiritual ceremony to take place with family there in the execution room after Honey is pronounced dead. It's only expected to last a few minutes, and then the medical examiner will take over. We also found out a little bit more information about the executioner. We found out that this person is an MD and will not be in the execution room. The IV lines will go through a hole in the wall into a separate room where the executioner will be administering the drug. So as a witness, we will not see the executioner in person in the execution room. So again, the time is almost here in just a few minutes. Department.
I mean, what a job, eh? An executioner. I don't know if Heather, are you still there? Sorry, I meant to pick up on what you mentioned about Pierpoint, the hangman, the famous hangman. What sort of, God, how do you go home and eat your tea after that? You know, how was your day, dear? Oh yeah, it was fine. You know, I hung someone, or, you know, lethally injected somebody. Just seems bizarre, doesn't it? A bizarre job, but gosh.
Department of Correction staff will be taking me through this next line of security to the execution room.
So once the execution is carried out, Jim and one of our photographers, Mike Stephen, will actually go back to that execution chamber, if you will, and they will be there for quite some time. Then they will come back to a media staging area for a final press conference, to which we'll be able to ask Jim, a number of folks from Department of Corrections, and other witnesses about their experience.
Outside the prison, where we have been reporting all day long, security's been tight. There was about 3 or 4 checkpoints as we were heading in that you had to show your driver's license. You also had to have your media credentials. And for that reason, that meant that they couldn't have protesters on the grounds. Once we were in here, we were not allowed to leave. And that's where Mark Cabell is. He's where the protesters and that free speech zone is. We want to go live to him right now and see what the scene's looking like there.
Hey guys, out here right now, they just had a prayer service that just finished up. They had several pastors and priests. It's an ecumenical service. Now they're giving individual people a chance to talk. They just sang Amazing Grace, and people behind me here are able to get up and give some thoughts about what they're thinking about right now as the hour gets closer to the execution. Now, most of these people behind me are against the death penalty. We've talked to a lot of them. They have a lot of varied reasons for it. We did talk to some people, though, that are pro death penalty, pro capital punishment. I talked to one man. His name is Walter Beach from Wisconsin. He actually lives here now, but he lived in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Wisconsin, one of 13 states that does not have a death penalty. He says the death penalty is a deterrent. He says he thinks Honey is going to get what he deserves today. The majority of the people here are against the death penalty. You have a little bit of a different take.
A little bit. From what I hear of the situation, the guy did a really heinous act. And I'm from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, just a little north of Chicago, Illinois, and we don't believe in the death penalty there. I mean, like, there's none of that there. Here there is. And home of Jeffrey Dahmer and others, Gacy, there was no death penalty. What I'm hearing, what this man did is egregious, really bad. And the death penalty isn't a punishment. It's kind of a release. Like, he shouldn't be here. Not even in prison, not even serving his time out, his life. None of that. He should go. I think that what he's done.
So this guy's saying he agrees with the death penalty, isn't he, I suppose? And he comes from Milwaukee, which, of course, is where Jeffrey Dahmer and who was the other one he said? But anyway, Jeffrey Dahmer didn't get the death penalty, but he did in a way because, of course, he was murdered in prison. Jeffrey Dahmer was murdered in prison. You know, I think they suffer. Don't they suffer more in prison? Or maybe they don't. People think they have a comfortable life in prison. I mean, it is comfortable in one way. You've got no worries about bills. You know, you get fed. You get your basics, don't you? I mean, all right, you've got no freedom. You've got no luxuries and stuff. But, you know, they have to give them so much because otherwise people just won't be quiet like for 20 years, will they? So... oh my God, it's such a conundrum.
And what he's done to the innocent people, the children, anyone else, that he shouldn't be here. He shouldn't be allowed to soak up taxpayers' money. I have a different perspective on it, a different view on it. And it's just how I feel, man. He shouldn't be here.
Well, I appreciate you at least giving us that side of the argument tonight, because you're outnumbered.
I know I am. And I just happen to be here. Like, his death penalty isn't a punishment, man. He should go. He should want to go. He shouldn't want to be here. What he did was wrong, and he shouldn't be here anymore.
Okay, give me your name again.
All
right, that was Walter Beach. Again, he moved here from Wisconsin, where they do not have the death penalty. And he says that this was an egregious crime. He said it was very violent. He said he's been watching the coverage, and he looked into it all. And he said that he's here because he thinks that the death penalty is warranted in Honey's case. Again, back out here live, we do have people giving personal testimonies about what they're thinking and feeling out here tonight. And
yeah, murder is never the solution. Now, the thing is, going back to, would it make any difference? I mean, the death penalty is there. All right, it's going to punish him for what he's done. But does it stop anybody doing it? You know, he obviously, on that night when he did that, he wasn't thinking, oh, I might get the death penalty for this. I better not do it. He just got lost in the moment because of whatever substances he was abusing or whatever alcohol he drank. So, you know, in the anger, he just felt so much rage. I don't think it would have stopped it. It doesn't stop somebody doing something, does it? I don't think it's a deterrent at all. I don't think it's a deterrent. So if one of the reasons of having the death penalty is that it's a deterrent, I don't believe there is. Because I think like people like Ted Bundy. You know, he would have done it anyway. That was something inside him. You know, it's just wrong inside him. He's just wired wrong. He's always going to kill people, that whether there's a death penalty or not, because that was his makeup. This guy, it's a different thing. It's like a rage, and he's, you know, but it's still terrible what he did, and he probably maybe does deserve to die. But gosh, honestly, I can talk myself in and out of it.
That's what's happening as the clock continues to tick down towards the execution time of Tabor and Honey. Guys, we're going to send it back to you. We'll keep an eye on things out here. If you need to come back to us, we'll be here for you.
Hey, Mark, if you hang tight for just a second, I had a question. We are on the prison property. You're about 1.5 miles from us. And if someone didn't apply for those credentials to be here tonight, media and journalists had to be where you are. Are there any national or world outlets that are there? I remember the last execution that happened in Utah, that was firing squad, so it was different, more attention on the state. Is there any national media covering this here tonight?
Yeah, there's several national media covering it tonight. Mostly print media that's national. They've been here all day along with us. Also, Heidi, they had something interesting here. They had a live look-in where you could actually go online and take part in a vigil from all around the country, and people could chime in during that vigil. We had a Jewish rabbi who sang a song. We had some other people that gave testimonials and talked about doing away with the death penalty all across the United States. So that was really interesting to see people actually on their laptops watching this vigil that was coming in nationwide, and people even here could actually chime in on that vigil. So, and yeah, there are some national print people, and there's a few national television people here as well covering this. This is a pretty big story, and there's people here, as we mentioned, the one man was from Milwaukee, another man is from Canton, Ohio. He's here, and we're going to hear from him a little bit later. He's here because he had a family member on death row in Ohio who actually had his sentence commuted because new evidence had come in the case. Now, he's still in jail, but they did commute his death sentence. So we're going to be talking to him a little bit later on in the show, and you'll hear some of what he thinks about the death penalty. Guys, back to you.
All right, Mark, we'll be checking back in with you. Interestingly enough, there was also an execution in Texas today. They lead the nation in the number of executions that happen here in Utah, certainly more rare. This will be our 8th since 1976. Now, just last week, as you've watched this process play out, Honey's lawyers were in court over a lawsuit trying to stop his death, one of their last-ditch efforts. They claimed the execution was unclear and also inconsistent.
A judge granted the request from the state to dismiss this lawsuit. Our Amanda Gilbert was actually in the courtroom. She joins us now and recaps what it was all about. Amanda's been following the process here and what's taken place over the last few weeks.
Yeah, guys, I was at the Matheson courthouse last Tuesday in the morning. And again, that was kind of described as Honey's attorney's last-ditch effort to stop or delay this. And he argued that the execution protocol laid out has been inconsistent. He said it needed to be better updated to avoid a botched execution. And he did talk to media after court. Then I took what he had to say to the Department of Corrections.
The Department of Corrections intends to carry out an execution without accurate or coherent written protocols.
This narrative of our procedure being carelessly put together and even reckless is just flat out false. And we really appreciate Judge Jones pointing out in her ruling that not only are we not violating the rights of Mr. Honey, but we have been more accommodating to the defense than we need to be.
And as you just heard, the judge did side with the state. Obviously, the execution moved forward. You just heard from Glenn Mills. He is with the Department of Corrections. He's been giving those hourly updates throughout the night tonight. Amanda Gilbert, KUTV 2 News.
All right, Amanda, before you go anywhere, those hourly updates, and you followed this case, anything stand out to you from some of those updates that were shared?
Yeah, something really big that stood out to me in almost all of the updates that we heard. Honey spent much of his last day with family, visiting with them, sitting on the ground, talking to them. At one point, even delaying time with attorneys to spend more time with them. And I know as far as his last meal, that gets a lot of attention. He requested milkshake, fries, hamburger, but he wants it to be known that his last meal was with family on campus. Back to you.
All right, Amanda, thank you. I think the word you heard there from Glenn Mills was accommodating. They said they've been more accommodating. They have to be. We heard tonight that even after he dies tonight, the family is going to be allowed to go in there and do some kind of Native American spiritual ritual after he dies there in that death chamber.
And they've granted a number of his requests, too, from what he's asked over the last week or so. We are now about 7 or 8 minutes away from the scheduled execution of Tabor and Honey.
Right now, we want to go back into the studio where Lincoln Graves and Jamie McGriff are joined by former Utah Attorney General Mark Shurtleff, who was the Attorney General at the time of the last execution, also Defense Attorney Sky Lazaro.
All right, Heidi and Brian, thank you so much for that. And once again, we want to thank you both for joining us this evening. Starting with former Utah Attorney General Mark Shurtleff, from your previous experience, what would the Attorney General be doing right now?
If it's still the same as it was 14 years ago, the warden responsible for the execution will not talk to anybody except the Attorney General. There's a phone, and he can only use that to talk to the Attorney General. So when the 1205, I think at that time was the death warrant said, because my attorneys were there to see if there was any last second Supreme Court stays. And so when that clock hits that, comes to me, I pick up the phone and call the warden, and I did.
I keep trying to put a comment on, so don't, when we talk about disappearing comments, sometimes I'm trying to put a comment on my own channel and it won't let me, it keeps rejecting it as spam. So what I was trying to say was Saddam Hussein, I watched his executed. I feel like YouTube's listening to me now because it wouldn't let me write it down. I watched, his execution was broadcast, wasn't it? On God, what was it then? It wouldn't have been TikTok or whatever. What did it? Oh, it was years ago, wasn't it? But I watched it, and Colonel Gaddafi being deposed, let's say, and he was murdered quite brutally, wasn't he? By the mob, like when he was deposed. But those sort of videos, even then, were getting out and circulating. I must have watched it on something. I don't know what. I always seem to find those because there must be something. I'll tell you what, if the police ever come and took my computer and looked at my browsing history, I'd be straight to prison.
In Ronnie Lee Gardner case and said, you're now authorized to go ahead with the execution.
Sky Lazaro, I want to turn to you. You're a criminal defense attorney, so you're coming at this from that perspective. What's going through your mind as we're awaiting this just minutes from now?
Largely what those attorneys are going through and what he's going through. All of his attorneys have spent years, the last 25 years trying to save his life. And now we're minutes away from him being executed. So I can't imagine what that's like being his defense attorney. You spend a lot of time with these people. As you defend them, you get to know them, you get to know their families. You are there to counsel their families, after the fact. It's a lot to deal with. So that's...
And a lot of years of waiting for this to happen and fighting to try to prevent this from happening. As far as the next steps after that moment, what will happen?
So, and I will tell you, it's a little haunting right now because even though it was my legal duty to do what I did, and I do support the death penalty, I did in that case because I was familiar with it, attended commutation hearings, talked to Ronnie Lee Gardner several times. It was a hard thing to do. It was very emotional for me to give that order, knowing that within a few minutes he was executed by a firing squad. And so I actually got in trouble that night because I was a Twitter user, and it wasn't, politicians didn't use Twitter at the time. And I just tweeted before I went out to the cameras in the boardroom to announce the same thing. And I said, I'd just given the order to execute Ronnie Lee Gardner, pray for the family, may, God have mercy on his soul. And I had hundreds and hundreds of complaints. That's not the right use of Twitter kind of thing.
But did you have complaints from people based on the decision that was made?
No, I did not. I mean, it's I guess still to this day, the death penalty is supported by a majority of Utahns. I still support it, but I don't support the way it's delayed here in Utah. We're the worst state as far as how long an offender is on death row, by far. Kentucky's the next.
No, but it's not only that. That It's how do you do it? How do you do it? So he's saying he supports the death penalty, but I don't know, it just seems barbaric to me. Sorry, it does. It's what sets us apart from countries like Iraq under Saddam Hussein, or other countries where, you know, they're like, we're very sniffy about them and say they're barbaric. So we don't want to be barbaric like that. That's what makes us a better society. Surely we've come on as a society, you know, to not have the death penalty. You know, you've got to take these people out of circulation, but, you know, I don't have any. I mean, to me, the sentences should be longer for most murders and things. Our sentencing in the UK is ridiculous for murder. You know, how short sentences that people get. But I do believe that it's the fact that we don't have the death penalty that makes us better people, to be honest.
Next closest to 27. The six there now average 32 years. And we just really need to fix that appellate process. You can give them all their rights and all their appeals, but there's a better way to do it.
Sky, we were talking earlier. Mark says he supports the death penalty. You indicated you don't, but you have some of the same sort of the viewpoint of this?
Yeah, I've been a defense attorney my entire career. I've always been opposed to the death penalty. When it came up in 20 and 21, you know, I worked on the efforts to have it changed here in Utah. But that is, I have a laundry list of issues with it and why I oppose it. But I share Mark's view on that. I think, you know, we're executing someone 25 years after the fact. He was 22 at the time and drug addicted and, you know, was using substances and alcohol and had all these things going on, you know, now we're 25 years down the road. He's been incarcerated this entire time. You know, he's not the same. We're not killing the same person, you know, that committed the crime at the time. And I certainly don't support taking away an appellate process either. You know, I think the better option is life without parole. If someone's going to serve 25 years before we ultimately, you know, put them to death, life without parole seems like a reasonable option.
Well, of course, we thank you both for your points, and we'll be checking back in with you both, defense attorney Sky Lazaro and former Utah Attorney General Mark Shurtleff.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we're going to turn our attention now to Heidi and Brian Schnee, who are both live out in the field to share more with us from that standpoint.
All right, Jamie, thank you. While the wheels of justice have turned slowly getting to this point, as we've been listening today, they're trying to make sure that this process goes smoothly. The execution's supposed to start at 12:01. They've had about 7 what they call dress rehearsals leading up to this. So hopefully when they get to that exact moment, everything goes as planned.
You mentioned the wheels of justice turning slowly. The crime was committed about 25 years ago. And about 25 years ago was also the last time we had a lethal injection death sentence carried out here in Utah.
I mean, 25 years he's been in prison. Why not just leave him there? Why, you know, I don't know, just seems crazy to me.
And that was Joseph Parsons. That was back in October of 1999, which was right around the time that Tabor Honey was actually convicted of this crime. So a lot of things to process from what Mark and Sky just said there, and shared about how times have changed, and Tabor Honey likely has also changed over the course of the last couple of decades.
And while he's likely changed, if you listen to the family members and even his own daughter, she did not plead for his life to be saved. She did testify, said that she has appreciated having this relationship with her father. But there were children at this crime scene when it happened, a very brutal, awful crime that were witnessed. It's torn this family apart, and it's been a rough 25 years.
You know, and we haven't gone into great detail, and we're not going to tonight, but about what this crime scene really was described as. And just a lot of media members out here covering this from various outlets are recounting what they remember in terms of covering the earlier days of this case.
Violent and brutal.
Violent and absolutely brutal, of course, sexual assault and murder. And it's one of those that at this point, it has been a lot of time, but as we've heard from folks that have physically spoken in front of the Board of Pardons and Parole, they are not healed in any way.
Yeah. So Those family members will be witnessing from both sides tonight. It is now 11:59 p.m., 2 minutes away from when that execution is set to begin. We want to go back out to Mark Cabell, who's about a mile and a half from the state prison where all of those protesters have shown up tonight.
Yeah, Heidi, right now, they're actually taking a phone call from a rabbi who's doing a prayer right now, singing a prayer for the group. You can see the group listening to it right now. Charles Keith just spoke to this group. He's from Canton, Ohio. He just got done speaking. This is his 76th protest at an execution. He got into all this because he had a family member back in Ohio who was on death row. They found some new evidence in the case. His sentence was commuted. He's still in jail, but he does not think the death penalty works. He says that it's his personal wish to abolish the death penalty across the United States, and that's what most of these people feel. This is what he told us today when he arrived here at his 76th protest of an execution here in Utah.
We weren't around during the time of Jesus, but we've all read about it. We go to church and we feel bad. And, it's a story that we, embed into our children, thou shalt not kill. And then as adults, we come out here and kill people who kill people to show them that killing is wrong. And, I'm having a problem with that. I had a brother in Ohio that was convicted of a crime. He was on death row for 16 years. And then they took him off death row based on an innocent claim and gave him life without parole. And though we've continued our investigation, we found enough information and evidence to put it on the governor's desk. And now we have a pardon sitting on the governor's desk on a man that could have been executed.
Charles, do you think with the new technology in DNA where we can go back and test these old cases, evidence from old cases, you think that's changed a lot of people's feelings about the death penalty? Because there's some people that have been convicted and put in prison and their DNA was never found at the scene.
Absolutely. Well, one thing about it is I'm finding across the United States that most of these guys are making claims of innocence because there is no DNA. There is absolutely nothing that you can say, hey, this guy definitively did that. No fingerprints, no footprints, no nothing. It's just a narrative. And I always tell people, if I can change the narrative as a citizen, then that's not an ironclad case. But if you've got the evidence, I can't argue against evidence. But most of the cases I've seen have not had the evidence that they needed.
Are you local, Charles?
No, I'm from Canton, Ohio. I'm an abolitionist. I work for Death Penalty Action. I'm the Impacted Communities Liaison. I usually talk to families and people that don't understand how the death penalty works and how all this comes together and what our rights are as citizens.
Thank you. Thank you for talking to us, Charles.
Thank you. Thank you.
Guys, we're back here live. We're back here live outside as the rabbi sings. It appears if everything's on schedule that the execution of Tabron Honey has probably already begun. Brian and Heidi, back to you.
Mark, thank you. You're right. It is 12:02 and would be 1 minute after the execution was scheduled to be carried out. What we will know is we will learn that the sentence has been carried out. And if that is the case, it'll likely be within maybe that 20 to 30 minute time frame from now.
That's right. The early drug cocktail that they planned on using, which was the ketamine and the fentanyl, they believe was going to work very quickly. Oftentimes they say it takes 12 to 15 minutes for this to happen, but because they're using the pentobarbital, which they didn't plan on, they said that will actually take longer. It could take up to 20 minutes before he's declared dead.
To which we also learned tonight there were 3 doses of that on hand in case the first dose did not take. It's one of those that they were preparing for, to have those backup doses. We do not.
I do think it's horrible, isn't it? I think as they're talking about this, that actually the guy is, being killed, really. So, and I thought he was very good, the guy that spoke earlier just before, saying that it just doesn't seem to make sense, does it? We're telling people not to kill, and then the way we're telling them not to kill is by killing people. And that sort of makes sense. Anyway, we'll watch this a little bit. It's quite a long video. Won't watch the whole thing. We'll watch another 5-10 minutes.
Not know what is happening inside there right now, other than everything appears to be on schedule, as it is now 12:03 here on Thursday morning, August 9th, and one of those that we've been waiting for this moment because of our coverage leading up to this. But as we learn more about what takes place here, we'll be sure to bring it to you right away.
As we were talking to Glenn Mills, the spokesperson for the State Department of Corrections earlier, he said that in the minutes leading up to this, that Tabron Honey, if he was being compliant, would be able to walk of his own free will into that death chamber. And from everything we've heard so far today, it seemed like that was going to be the case. If something happened otherwise, they would have to restrain him and then move him in otherwise. But it sounds like he probably walked in there minutes ago, was strapped to that table before this began.
But was also going to be given the opportunity to speak tonight as well. And that sounded like something that maybe he was going to take advantage of. He was made aware that if anything kind of went off the rails, they would cut that microphone right away. So we'll be interested to talk to our Jim Spiewak here, who was the execution witness from KUTV2 News, when he is out shortly after all of this takes place, to get his perspective of what took place right around the 12 o'clock.
Right, I'm just going to fast forward it, see maybe we can hear what that guy says that is. I did read out what his last words were, but let's see.
That's one of the well-known side effects of ketamine, is that it could induce or can induce psychosis, hallucinations, delusions, and that could render him into a state of incompetence to be executed.
Robin Marr is the executive director of the Death Penalty Information Center in Washington, D.C.
Brian and Heidi, I know you guys will, as soon as that comes down, that you'll have the official word. But these people, like I said, knelt in prayer and were very quiet between 12:01 and about 12:10. So back to you guys. It was a very quiet and somber moment out here.
Well, Mark, nothing official has come down as of yet.
There will always be that empty chair at the table when the family gathers, and no amount of killing will bring back our loved ones. So the question for us is, where do we go from here?
I'm not sure either.
It really doesn't matter.
They took part in singing several songs, and they also had a religious service here with a lot. Guys, if you don't mind, we're going to walk over.
The execution has been confirmed, and the world is no safer. Utah is no safer. Another victim family has been created, and a victim family is soon to learn that another killing didn't change anything for them. There will always be that empty chair at the table when the family gathers, and no amount of killing will bring back our loved ones. So the question for us is, where do we go from here? It really doesn't matter what promises you make. What matters is what promises you keep. And so tonight, I want to invite everybody to make a promise to yourself as to what you're going to do to work to an end to state-sponsored violence like executions and all the other flavors of violence that make us lesser as a people. The hope I have is from the number of people that are here, and the fact that for each person that is here, there are many, many, many more who would be if they could, if they knew about it, if they had the wherewithal, if somebody had helped them, if somebody had talked to them. And together, as we bring our message that we didn't need this execution in order to hold Tyrone Honey accountable or to be safe from him if he was still a future danger, which he was not. We did not need this.
We're gonna break. Abraham, he is with Stop Execution now, his group, and he made the official announcement here that indeed the execution of Tyrone Honey did happen, and it had occurred. And now he's just speaking to the people that are here before they wrap up this demonstration.
Okay, I'm going to stop it there. So, you know, I think it's one of those eternal questions, isn't it? And I don't think it will ever be a deterrent. I don't think it is a deterrent at all. Just don't. I think when people commit murders like that guy did when he was in an alcoholic rage or a drug-fueled and alcohol rage, or whatever, psychosis or whatever. I just don't think he would have been thinking, oh, I might get the death penalty for this. It just wouldn't have even occurred to him. And other murderers, like serial killers, etc., I don't think it occurs to them either, because they just do it because they want to do it. They enjoy it. They enjoy killing people, and they're going to do it whatever the punishment is. So the only people I suppose it might stop are people like premeditated, people planning to kill their partner. They're going to think about it. But I still don't think it would stop him. I think because normally when someone murders someone, they think they know, they've got it all planned out, don't they? We've seen that so many times. They think they're so clever, and they've got the police, the police are stupid, and they don't think they're going to get caught. So I don't know. I think it's got to be, there isn't that much death penalty now in the US, and the murder rate is still high. Even in the states where there is a death penalty, I'm trying to say. I don't look at Davido with Anna Knezevich. It's death penalty in Florida, but he still did it. He still tried to do it. I don't think it. Well, that's my opinion anyway. We've all got our views. I just don't think it does make a difference. At all. I think people will still do it, even if you had the death penalty in every state. If you brought the death penalty back to the UK, there's still going to be, it didn't stop, because when the Moors murderers, for example, when they were actually killing, the death penalty was in place. And murderers like Harold Shipman, Dr. Death, I don't think it would have stopped him doing what he was doing, would it? I don't know. It's one of the, I do think it's an eternal conundrum, but really the most thing for me is, I think, what sets us apart from the murderers, apart from the countries that do have, brutal sentences, maybe chopping someone's hand off because they steal something might make someone think twice about stealing it, but it doesn't make it right, does it? That's why we're different. We don't do those kind of things. Our society surely is better than that. Is it? Oh, that's what I think. But it's very emotive, because there are some cases, aren't there, as we've said, especially about children, and your initial thing is, oh my God, but then when it comes to the reality of it, how are you going to do it? And would you kill these young men who do these things? It gets so complex, and then how are you going to do it? What's a humane way of doing it? All those complex questions make it, maybe it's better that we don't have it. Because at least we don't have to. How are you going to decide who has it and who? As I can tell you exactly what will happen is, all the poor people will get it, and the rich people will get away with it because they've got the best lawyers. That's probably already happening in America in a lot of these states. You can bet if you're poor, you're going to get the death penalty, and it's going to happen. And if you're rich, you've got a good chance of getting off with it because you can afford the best lawyers. Anyway, well, there you go. That's something to think about as you're nodding off to sleep tonight, about whether we should bring back the death penalty or not. But these questions, it's good to keep debating them, because I think what's happened in America, the appetite for the death penalty, as they were saying, it has gone down. There's not as many people support the death penalty as before. Of course, Donald Trump, on his last day of office as president, he signed a load of bloody death warrants, didn't he? He just went and signed a load of them. You know, some people do believe in the death penalty, but they normally the people that believe in the death penalty, they're the religious people. This is what sort of just gets me, because, you know, if you're a religion, like that guy that was talking earlier when he said, oh, I do support the death penalty, I hope, what did he say? I hope God has mercy on his soul or whatever. See, that to me is a conundrum just right there. You know, if you believe in God, only God, if you believe in God, only God has the right, you know, to decide when someone's life's up or not. Is, you know, killing someone, what under any circumstances is you know, against God, if you like. So you can't sort of believe in God and believe in the death penalty, in my opinion, because it's part of the reason that I believe in God, that I think I wouldn't have the right to decide that somebody else should die. So anyway, yeah, it's one of those philosophical questions. We could go on all night discussing it, but anyway, thank you for being here with me, and I will see you tomorrow, I'm sure, at some point. What day is it tomorrow? Wednesday. I've got a video that, I want to do a video about that super yacht at some point. I hope that, well, it doesn't look like they're going to find anybody alive, does it? Anybody else alive? Oh gosh, the dogs. Is that Chihuahua? Honest to God, I'm sorry. I know a lot of you have got Chihuahuas. This Chihuahua never stops, and then it's shush. She hasn't learned to stop it irritating her yet. So she starts barking. The Chihuahua's got this yeah, and then she starts with this bellowing bark. I know they took someone else's life without a thought. I know, yeah, it's true. It's some things. Yeah, food for thought today. So it wasn't much fun. Wasn't much fun, but it was food for thought. Sometimes we have to think about things, don't we? So I'm sure I'll see you tomorrow. If not, I'll definitely see you on Thursday. Take care, sleep well. I hope you don't get a visit from Ted Bundy tonight after talking about all this. You know, he likes to pop in every now and again and bang a door or something. So I'll see you really soon in the next video. And until then, may your God go with you and stay safe. Bye. You'll find my little video to put on. Oh, and don't forget to like, of course. Don't forget to hit the like button. Adios.